Dr. Jazz.
I think you've been so busy when I look at you and the records I bought from, and I have you on, but I want to start with the last one, You as a Leader, It's Always Now. And, I was with my daughter, she's 10 months old, and we listened to the record again today in the morning, playing, and every now and then she was like, huh? Looking what's happening, but it's
what is that? That's music.
No, it's so beautiful because it's a different record from the previous ones. I mean, it's a continuation of what you do as a composer, but also I get a sense of this more open, fragile, yet also kind of haunting side. Like, what's the story behind the record? And obviously, it's the guys from Europe this time. How did you decide for this one?
Well, this band came from me moving here, a lot of ways, and I thought it was a good opportunity to, it was during the lockdown, and I thought, well, all these access to all these great musicians over here, and it's a good time to do something different. I played with pretty much a similar roster of musicians for many years, so it was nice to have the experience playing with these people. Really, in a lot of ways, for the first time, we didn't have much of a history going into that record. So yeah, it was as is always the case. It's just a process going from the beginning to the end, and there's all sorts of things that present themselves, and you kind of act accordingly. So this was really no different in a lot of ways. I mean, it's you're just trying to make the best record you can, with the musicians you're playing with, and the material that you pick, and but even during the couple of days of recording, it went through a lot of changes and sort of a feeling out process of how to play the music. So
was there any difference for you as a composer? I mean, when I listen to the previous records or even the early stuff, when I bought those early ones, like This Against That was a really rhythmical story. You kind of continue that, but still you kind of even more opened it up. I think on this one, it's quite, especially the first part of the record, it's way more loose, I think.
Yeah, again, like each band is different, so I try to not dictate how people are going to play, and I try to have a good sense for what the music is and the musicians playing it, and for the music to be as natural as possible. So I'm like a lot of composers, jazz musicians nowadays. We kind of like it all, and I do. I love rhythmic music, but like more abstract music. I like music with nice harmonies. It all depends. And I try to explore different types of pieces, and so this was just the match of the music with the band, and I felt like this would give us the best chance to make the best record.
Yeah. How do you write music in general? I mean, what's your process there?
The process is that I don't really have a process in a way. I don't really have one. I wish I did in some ways. I wish I could streamline it a bit better, but it's just a starting point, and you're just trying to kind of move down this road and trying to get it to a place of hearing. Sometimes there's a longer flow or an initial flow that covers more ground, a lot of times it's just it's an initial little spark. It's not that different than the way most composers I think compose. Yeah, I work on a lot of different pieces, which I guess is a double-edged sword. I take advantage of the technology, so I have lots of pieces on my computer. And I normally compose directly into the notation software. Normally, there are exceptions. Sometimes I'll go to a piano. Sometimes I write things in my little music notebook as I'm traveling, but it's mostly just entering it. Trying to go with my intuition, what I hear, and then I kind of go from there. I listen to the playbacks, and as I get closer to a project, a record or a concert, that's when I really decide to, what am I going to focus on and how am I going to finish this piece? So it's I like to compose, and I've got lots of pieces that are in progress.
Yeah, I always loved your writing. I mean, since the early 2000s, it's so cool. It's like, especially the early stuff. Also, like I was obsessed with rhythm, and there was a lot of that going on in the early records. So I really love that. It's beautiful stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Otherwise, this last one is also for ECM, and I think it's your fourth one for ECM, if I'm not mistaken. But you did already one with Michael Caine and Peter Epstein, and which is kind of co-led. But like, how is it for you working with Manfred? And I mean, it's quite a strong tradition on ECM, also trumpet. I always think of Kenny Wheeler and Lester Bowie and many other players. But how did this story with Manfred begin, and being a band leader for ECM?
I believe it happened because a woman that I know used to work for ECM, and she heard my band play, the band with Jason Moran and Nasheet Waits, Gress. And she really liked the music, and she worked, in tandem with Manfred. So I think she probably initiated the process of that, being a possibility for Manfred. And Manfred, I guess he just liked the idea. I mean, I don't think he was that familiar with what I did, just other than the Michael Caine record, but I think he definitely liked Jason, and he knew enough about the rest of the band, and so that's how that project came to pass. And we made the first record, and from there, we made the other three records. So it wasn't something that I was vying for, and it just happened. So I was pretty thrilled, to be honest. I mean, I'm like any jazz fan or jazz musician that is familiar with that tradition of this incredible music on ECM, and I was honored to have the opportunity.
How is it working with Manfred, let's say, in this last one? I mean, how much does he influence the storyline, put it like that, of the record? Or
I think it's his presence in the studio, and it's he says enough to influence what's going on as we're recording. He has incredible ears for music, and that's what makes him who he is. And as always with all these records, he always has really interesting ideas about sequence. So he's he really does shape the music as it's happening, but a lot of it really is after the fact, in terms of the mix and just how it's going to flow into a story. He's has great ideas. It's always it's different than what I imagine. Although I did the first track on the record, I felt very strongly about that being the beginning of the record, and so there was kind of a back and forth with him because I think he had a different idea about how to start the record, but he did acquiesce to my ideas there in terms of sequence.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I said, the record starts really, I was listening and I was like, oh shit, okay, it's like gonna be really an open one, and then it kind of builds up, like there are some middle pieces there, like a lot of tension going on, and so it's a really nice kind of story.
Yeah, like a typical Manfred thing. That's something that I wouldn't think about, and what most people don't really consider. So the first piece is the duo.
Yeah.
Piece with Florian, and then after that, normally one would then, and I think I had something in mind. I had a tune in mind that would be that would have more energy to it. But I think it's a typical Manfred thing to. I remember talking to Michael Caine about this, about the sequence on his record, that Manfred, his concept a lot of times is, no, why don't you just have 2 or 3 pieces in the same flavor to really strengthen that mood, and so the second piece is the ballad on the record.
Oh baby, yeah, that's a nice melody. Yeah,
that's
a beautiful melody. Yeah.
It's again, like all roads lead to his way of hearing, and he has unprecedented ears for music.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you said obviously you were familiar with the ECM tradition, but if I go back late 70s, early 80s, I don't know when that happened for you, but like when was that jazz moment that you decided you want to go that path? I mean, for improvisation and jazz music, did you have that like hearing something, or?
You mean with ECM's music?
No, like in general. I mean, like when
just in general. Oh yeah. I was so I got into jazz when I was in high school, but I didn't think that was really going to be what I was going to do. It was more for fun, and I was really intrigued by it and loved the sound of it, loved the idea of it, but I didn't think that's what I was going to do. I was raised as a classical player, and
okay.
And then it was a lot of just these meetings with young musicians, kindred spirits. I went to several different colleges actually, and each time I changed schools, I hooked up with people that were into jazz and knew more about jazz than me, and that was a big part of my education. Just hanging with these people and listening to music, and them introducing all this music to me. And so I ended up at a school called California Institute of the Arts, and that's really where I would say that was a serious turning point for me, where I started encountering all of these incredible students that were more advanced than me, really, and they became friends, and I learned a lot from them as players and composers. I didn't really think of myself as a composer until going to school there, and some great musicians. Scott Colley was there. Michael Caine was there. Ravi Coltrane. Okay. There was a great pianist composer. 2 of them, James Carney and David Ake, and So it was this really amazing community, and we were all making music there, and that's where I decided, I think I need to be doing this. There was a certain way of thinking about improvisation. It was significantly more. It had much more of the idea of playing spontaneously and really valuing that. So that was a different experience, and when I started to have that, I wanted more of that. And then my one by one, all of these friends of mine that I was playing with were moving to New York, and I didn't really want to move to New York, but then I felt like I needed to do the right thing and just kind of keep this momentum going. And
when did you move to New York?
1991.
91. Okay.
So at first I struggled and was not enjoying myself. I
Sure.
wanted to leave immediately, and kind of hung in there, and then it was really, in a lot of ways, it was actually getting a job at the Eastman School of Music, and sort of leaving New York in a way, but not completely leaving New York. So I was close enough to New York where I continued to come there to play gigs, and that's when my career really changed. And then when I moved back to New York, then I absolutely fell in love with the city. And I despite being in Switzerland, I still have a place in Brooklyn, and that's still my home.
Yeah. You became such an integral part, I mean, of the music. I think you're on so many records that I really love, and starting with Steve Coleman. I mean, I wanted to ask you about Steve, like, who I guess was one of the first guys, right, that you started to play regularly with. Like, how did the story with Steve begin, actually?
The way that happened was I had met Steve as a student at Banff as thing in Canada, and Steve was sort of the director of that program for those 2 weeks, and so I met him, but I also met a lot of great students that have continued to be great friends and colleagues, especially Andy Milne. He was a student there, Tony Malaby and Benoit Delbecq and Ethan Iverson. It was just
this generation, okay.
Seamus Blake, there was just so many great players there. But I met Steve, and so I would say 2 or 3 years after that, he contacted me about one of his records, his record called Tale of Three Cities. This is a hip-hop record, and he just hired me to record these overdubs. It was actually an interesting process. So we were playing on these tracks, and then basically Steve was coming up with these little phrases and things that we would harmonize, and that eventually were cut up and produced and processed on this record. And and then shortly after that, he asked me to go on a tour, and I did that, and I was always surprised that he asked me to do another tour. I was pleasantly surprised. So that continued for 5-6 years of recordings and tours, and it was an amazing experience. Really, kind of a dream, to tell you the truth. He's someone I really admired and still do, and so that was quite a learning experience.
I wanted to ask you about that. How did you, dealing with his compositions, how did that go? I mean, and his concept, actually.
It was, based on just learning things by ear, which is really the best way to learn music. And that's one of the many lessons I learned playing with him. That when you learn music that way, you never forget it. And his music is very complex, and despite all these crazy tunes, I still remember them to this day. So I learned about that, and I also learned this kind of importance with when you learn a piece of music, you need to learn all the elements of the piece, not just your part. So that was really a central issue to his music, and I try to impart that to my students. So in a lot of ways, he was really a great teacher. I really, it was like being in school in a lot of ways. I was very aware of his music, but just surface level, and then getting an opportunity to really get into the nuts and bolts of those pieces, and then how he thinks about music, and just a great experience.
Was it with Steve that you went to Europe the first time as a touring musician, or?
No, I had done a couple tours before that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
The first one I did was with Michael Caine, just a few duo gigs with
Really?
him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Around 1989 or so.
Already? Wow. Okay. Oh, cool. Interesting. How did I listened to Hissy Fit. I actually have that on MP3. And how did that one happen? I mean, did you start when you were in New York? Obviously, you were playing with Ravi Coltrane and Uri Caine and Steve Coleman and all these guys. Like, when did you start leading bands, and how did that record happen, actually?
I was leading, when I moved to New York, I co-led a band. So I guess that was my first venture into leading a band. So that was right when I moved there. That was a band called Xtet with Ravi and all my Cal Arts friends, Ravi, Michael Caine, but also David Egg played piano, Scott Colley, and Jerry Gibbs, drummer. But so Hissy Fit came from so that was around 1998, and what was that? That was around 98. I was at the Eastman School of Music teaching there, and I was living in Rochester, New York, and there wasn't really an idea to make a record. So that was a combination of a live gig performed at the Bop Shop in Rochester, and that was basically a short rehearsal a few hours before, and we played this gig, and it was recorded. So I think Hank Roberts was part of that. He had a friend who recorded remotely, so he recorded the gig. And Shane Ensley plays drums on that, but he's known as a trumpet player. He's a great trumpet player, but also a great drummer too. And he had been a student at Eastman, and I think by that point, I think he was living in New York. So he drove up from New York, as well as Peter Epstein and Kokai, who I met in Steve Coleman's various projects. And I just thought, I mean, it was obvious. I mean, he was just an incredible improviser. And I just had the idea it would be fun to just have this, just quickly rehearse some music. I mean, it was really crazy, thinking about that. It's like, these guys drove 6 hours to Rochester. I think we had a rehearsal around 4:00 for a couple hours, and the gig was at 7:30. And so anyway, that concert was recorded, and then the next day, I think we recorded a few more tracks at my house. I was living in a giant house in Rochester all by myself, which had really great acoustics. And so this guy, Larry Helmetzi, I think was his name, was Hank's friend. So he brought his equipment to my house, and then we recorded a few more pieces, and then kind of cobbled it together, brought it to Jay Granelli, who starting his own label, kind of back in those days where not everybody was had their own label. Now it's just a given. So I brought that to Jay, and Jay liked the music, and I think Jamie Saft mixed it. And that was that. So that was my first record, which received the worst review I've ever received. It was the first review that for that record, and I was on tour, and Jay sent me I got an email, and he said something like, he sent it to me. He just said that the subject was like, enjoy, and it was a really nasty, scathing review of that record. This guy did not like anything about the record. Fortunately, I brought myself out of a serious depression that day, but the reviews after that were pretty good, and so I didn't end my career after that.
On the contrary, I think you did so many great records. Like, was it natural for you being a band leader? I mean, in the beginning.
Well, that's what this guy said. He said some people are sidemen and some people are leaders, and Alessi is not a leader. So,
wow, okay,
yeah, but I didn't know anything about leading a band, back in those days. So yeah, I did have a lot to learn. I mean, I like the record, so it's not
a beautiful record.
It's not like that review, really brought me down ultimately, because in my heart, I believed in the music, and but that was my beginning of being a leader, and I've learned a lot, and I really I enjoy being a leader. I like making the decisions about the music, and I feel like I have a pretty good sense for how to create a nice environment conducive for this kind of spontaneous playing, which is, for me, very, very, very important.
Do you usually, like, as a composer, also as a band leader, write for the, I mean, especially with Baida, let's say, or Quiver, I get the idea you actually wrote for those players. I mean, did you have that band actually in mind when you composed music, or?
I never have the band in mind when I compose.
Really?
Never.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, just compose. I compose, and then I have the band in mind when it's time to make decisions about which pieces are going to be played on a record or a gig. So that's when I do think about the band. But interesting. Maybe I should do it one time, because I always love the idea, and you hear about Ellington and that idea. I like that idea. I just never do it. I just compose. I just write pieces, and they go in whatever direction they're going to go in, and then I try to match it up with the band.
Yeah, I mean, if you have such bands, it's quite. It's not hard, really. You give them that, and it's just like, just play, guys, right?
Yeah,
it's
I do that. I have a lot. I always bring music into student groups and things like that. Same thing. It's just like, well, what's going to work? What's going to work with this band?
Exactly.
And but yeah, I mean, obviously, people on the level of these musicians that I've been so fortunate to play with, they can basically play anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wanted to ask you also about your connection with Fred Hirsch. Like, how did this, and actually also with Uri Caine, I mean, two incredible piano players, and you've been so active with both of them. Like, how did you begin to play with them?
Trying to think. Well, definitely with Fred. Fred was aware of the Michael Caine record. I think he contacted me and he said, I heard you on this record, and I really like it and would love to play. So he invited me over to his place, and we played duo. So that's how that came to be. And then Uri, it could have been the same. He might have heard that record, but I think he was just aware of what I was doing at the time, and I had met him before I started playing with him. But I was really lucky during that time. I had a lot of momentum, and there were records that I was playing on that some people were hearing and were aware of me and started to ask me to play with them. So that was a really special time for me, around 1995, 6, 7, 8, right around that time. There was a lot of momentum.
Yeah, I checked like some records, like I think from like you said, like late 90s. I mean, it must have been crazy for you. You're like in a couple of bands are actually, touring groups as well, and it's insane. I mean, those times probably, right, touring wise, or
Well, yeah, I mean, it's compared to now. I mean, it's I'm not doing anything compared to what I was doing then, but I still keep somewhat busy. But that was a lot of a lot of road time, and I was definitely playing with lots of people, and it was fun. It was I had a great time, but the whole business is so different now.
Yeah.
But that was a time where a lot of people were active, from New York. I mean, people were on the road all the time.
Yeah. How did you keep fresh, or even nowadays, like on tour, that let's say you play 30 gigs in 40 days, like how do you maintain I had like my longest tour last year, 17 gigs in 18 days. And after gig number 10, I was so frustrated with myself. I thought I was playing the same stuff always, but it was quite open music and everything. Like, how do you deal with being on the road for a long time, let's say? Or
well, I mean, it's like I was just saying, it's not like the old days. So I don't go. I'm not on the road. I did a 2-week tour last March, and yeah, it's super challenging. I mean, it takes a lot of energy, and to keep physically fresh and mentally fresh, and keep your ears open, and it's super hard to sustain. But I don't know. I mean, sometimes I've been successful at it, but other times I'm beat up by the end, and I'm just I'm just trying to get through, so it can vary, but I did a short tour at the end of June in the States with Andy Milne, Mark Ferber, and
beautiful.
And
Drew?
No, it was John Hebert.
Oh yeah, oh beautiful, man.
And I mean the travel was crazy, and I was just absolutely exhausted, and so this stuff doesn't get any easier when you get older, and it's just, I mean, the people like Billy Hart, who
that's
doing this for just forever, 60 years of just touring all the time. I mean, it's just crazy, so it can be super challenging, but you can also get energized by the music, so ideally that's what you want.
I wanted to ask you also, like, about playing already before, like, tricky, difficult music. I'll put it like that. I mean, many times you encounter odd meters, like, or let's say in Drew's bands. I love those bands. I hope he will redo them again. Drew, please, the quintet. But like, how do you manage? When you got a complex structure, you seem so effortless. You're playing always, even in your music. How did you practice that, or even nowadays?
Well, it might seem that way, but sometimes, I mean, sometimes I put the necessary time into it where I feel like I'm playing it, and then other times I haven't spent enough time with it and it's playing me, so just to be perfectly honest, I mean, it's a battle, like with music, there's some times where you've kind of approached it in the right way and spent enough time on it where you do feel free on things that are super intricate and difficult, and then other times where it's not quite at the level that I want, where I feel like I'm just as jazz musicians say, fronting, it's sort of fake, in a certain way. So but I have, like a lot of modern musicians, I am attracted to things that have a certain complexity to it, but it has to be good music, and but I also spent a lot of time as a classical player working on contemporary etudes that are pretty gnarly, as we say.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess that was good training to play some of these really angular melodies and things of that nature, you know. So yeah, but yeah, and then Steve playing in Steve's band. I mean, that's some of the hardest music I've ever played, you know, and would love another opportunity, you know, just it's extremely difficult music to not only play but to be free on. I mean, that's the whole point. That's something that is really just sort of the bottom line for all music. You have to free yourself up from, you know, what the music is and bring something new to it spontaneously. You know, it's a super cool thing.
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah. I just like when I hear you guys, you know, or like John O'Gallagher or who any of players of, you know, this kind of, it's the same bag. It sounds so effortless, and I'm always like, damn. I play odd meters a lot, but then I get lost so many times in between, like, but still learning, I guess we all are. Yeah, but otherwise, Ralph, I wanted to ask you just one thing. You know, you're in Switzerland now, and you've been involved, I think, in education for such a long time. Also in New York already. I mean, you established your own collective school, and what got you excited also for that part? I mean, the educational part. What's the interesting part there for you?
I think from the beginning of my teaching, which was around 92 or so, I taught at a school in Long Island called Five Towns College. And just right from the beginning, I realized that teaching could be fun and creative. And I've sort of have stayed with that approach. I've been really lucky to be able to teach in the way I want to teach. So so it sort of started there, and then in particular, when I was at Eastman for those 4 years, I really didn't see much of a separation between teaching and playing.
Yeah,
and it was all just another variation on this idea of just being part of the creative process. So I just really was that Eastman experience that kind of propelled me forward with the idea to start SIM, which I did in collaboration with Peter Epstein, and I just thought, boy, this can really be simplified into just get a teacher or teachers in a room with open-minded students, play music, listen to music, and talk about music, and I try to bring that into the jazz academia paradigm, and fortunately, I've been able to do that in a way that's really satisfying. So I need to teach. Every time I'm active in teaching, it always enhances my creativity, and I know that not everybody feels that way, but for me, I've been lucky about that. You know, I do every school that I'm at, including these SIM workshops. Listening is always a staple.
That's so important
for the experience, and part of that came from all the hundreds and hundreds of hours of listening to music, whether it was with people or driving around California in my car. But also being at Cal Arts, one of my teachers was Charlie Hayden, and Charlie would play music for us all the time, and do it with such enthusiasm. I just feel like it's a given that if you're going to play music, you've got to be super inspired and turned on by this music, and when you hear it, so he really showed us that. I mean, I was already engaged in that, with the people, my friends. We would get together and listen to hours of music, You know, so we would show up for Charlie's class, and he'd say, "I got to play this for you," and he would play music for us, you know, and he was like a little kid, you know, like just so, you know, so excited about the music and dancing, you know, and like sort of conducting the music as it's happening. And one time he played for us Horace Silver's "Lonely Woman." You know, his original, you know, recording of that piece, and you know, Charlie knew every single nuance of Horace's piano solo on that, you know, and that was a really great experience to witness that, and that really stayed with me, you know, to really know music that intimately, and for it to excite you to that point is to me is a given. I mean, you know, we don't get rich doing this, so you usually turn you on.
I mean, that's such an important point, because that's when I also teach workshops or students, I think that's a big part lacking in educational system, the listening part. I mean, they know how to transcribe a solo, but it's just like this listening, really. I wish there was more of that, actually, you know, players of getting to know the history and really listen. I mean,
yeah. Well, actually, at my school, so Jim Black is teaching here as well, and he has a class listening to. I think the class is just listening to ECM music, you know. So I get the feeling it's becoming more of a thing, you know. The Jazz Gallery in New York now has these listening sessions where musicians come in and they play music for an audience, and I did that years ago with Sim. Try to get that off the ground. So I really believe in the idea of shared listening experience. You know, that's so important.
Yeah, no, it's I think that should be such an integral part, especially if you have like someone like you or another composer player there in the room, and then, you know, students can ask questions, and then you discuss and listen to the same tune, focus first on the drums. I used to do that. I'm self-taught, so when I was studying, I had like 1 hour per day of listening, just first focusing on the bass, then just like on the hi-hat, actually, or whatever. Like, I was like, damn, that's so good. Like, cool that the students are lucky that they get to learn with you. So
I'm supposed to do so. I'm doing a video for jazzheaven.com on Sunday, and that's going to be, it's called Essential Listening. So I'm just gonna. So what, you know, it's what is most natural for me to listen to music and talk about music. You know, so that's going to be recorded on Sunday.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Ralph, not to take too much of your time, I just wanted to ask you also, like, you said you're not touring nowadays so much, but like, do you have something coming up next year or in the upcoming months to promote the new record, or where can people see you on the road? I mean, I guess in Europe. I mean,
well, actually, next week I am playing some gigs promoting this record. It's not the whole band, but you know, Gerry Hemingway is playing, and a young pianist that was a student of mine here in my school, Mathieu Mazou, and a Swiss bass player named Lucas Traxel. So we're going to be doing some gigs starting in Bern and Geneva,
Swiss,
Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and then Lugano. So that's coming up over the next few weeks. In terms of upcoming projects, I'm going to do another record for ECM. We just
really?
I have to find a date, but I think if I can pull it off, I think it's going to be with David Vareas, John Hebert, and Nasheet Waits.
Okay.
And also my brother. My brother is a great classical trombonist. I think he's going to be involved in the project as well. So hopefully that's recorded over the next 6 to 12 months. You know, we just have to find a date.
Oh
So,
man, beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, and I've been fortunate to be part of Tim Burns' regular series at Lowlands Bar in New York. So gonna play another gig with him in New York, and I think in a month, maybe that's in December, more or less. But yeah, I just continue to play in New York and play some gigs in Europe here and there, and so keeping busy enough.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Superman, beautiful. Looking forward to the new one. Say hi to John, by the way, Bear. Haven't seen him for such a long time. I mean, one of the funniest guys in the business.
He's a character.
Yeah, but a monster player, of course. But yeah, but cool, sir. Thanks so much. I will leave you a nice afternoon, or I guess you'll teach later, or you're free. I don't know, but thanks for sharing some of this stuff. Appreciate it.
Oh, of course. Thanks for asking me, Samo.
Yeah, and I hope to see you around. I mean, let me know.